In this video, I'm going to plot these functions that I have written here. So I'll start with this one here, f of x is equals to x squared. I'll go on and enter the code there. So for the code, I'll first create a symbolic variable, x. Then enter this function, I'll call it f1. Since it's my first function there, so it's f1 is equals to x, the power 2. So that's my first function there. Then I go on and plot it using the fplot function. Open parenthesis, we are plotting f1. So what fplot does is it plots this function f of x is equals to x squared. It uses the domain minus 5, 5. That's the default one. So I can just run there. And we see there, it has plotted the function f of x is equals to x squared. And as I said, the domain there is minus 5, 5. If you want to change the domain, what you do is you come here inside the parenthesis, then put a comma, then open brackets, then specify the value of the x that you want to start from. If I say, for example, 0, then comma 4. So in this case, it will plot the function in the domain 0 to 4. I can just run here. So we have that function has been plotted from 0 to 4. Now the next step is when you have plotted a function, you should put the labels, the label on the x-axis, the label on the y-axis. So I can just go on and click on the file. And when I click on the file, what will come up is this part here where it says figure, and it asks you to put a label. So I can say label here, and I can just call the label x. And then I can just click anywhere outside the graph there, and then I click on update code. So it has the label there as x. And we can do the same thing for the label for the y. But for the label for the y, I can just copy this command here. And then copy it. Then just enter here, then paste. Then instead of the x label, I'll just say y. And where we are having the x there, we will say f of x. We'll say f of x there. So that's what we are having, and I can just run there. So we are having f of x and the x there. But as you can see, the font there is not the usual font that we use. What I can try to do is I can go on and change the interpreter there. So I can put a comma, then type in interpreter, this one. Then it asks you which one, none or text or LaTeX. I usually use LaTeX here for the interpreter. Then I can go on and run. But still it has not changed that much, because for the interpreter LaTeX to work here, you should put this in $signs. Then when it's in $signs there, I'll run it. Then we have that f of x, which is of the similar font as this one, where we have the LaTeX one. Then I can go on and click on the graph again. We can put a legend. So click on legend here, so that we are saying that we are putting the graph of y equals to x squared is this blue line. I can click on update code. But this x squared there is not of this format that we use, x squared there. I can go on and change the interpreter like what I did there. So comma, then interpreter, this one here. Then we say that we need the interpreter to be the LaTeX one. So if the interpreter is the LaTeX, then I go on and run. So it's now giving us our f of x, and you are saying this is the line x squared. When you are looking at the domain 0 to 4, if you don't specify the domain, then it just plots from minus 5, 5 by default. So I can go on to the next one there, we want to plot this function f of x is equals to square root of x. So I'll enter the code there. So for the second one there, I'll call the function f2 is equals to square root of x. So the command there is sqrt, open parenthesis, x. So that's the f2. Then the command for plotting is fplot, open parenthesis. We are plotting now f2. And as I said, if you don't specify the domain like what it did here, it will just plot from -5 to 5. So I can just scroll down here and we have here our f2 is equals to square root of x, and it's plotting up to 5. It did not include the -5 just because for the square root there is not defined for negative values. So that's the graph of f2 is equals to square root of 5. And so you can label it like what it did here to have your x, your function f of x, and put the legend here to say it's the graph of what. So I can go on to the next one, this function here. Click on code, then we'll call this one f3. So for our f3, it will be 1 divided by, open parenthesis, x plus 1. So that's our f3 there. And then to plot it, we'll just call the function there, fplot, open parenthesis, and we are saying we want to plot the third function here. Then I go on and plot, and as I said before, it will just plot for the domain -5 to 5, of which you can change it if you want. So that's the graph there of 1 divided by x plus 1, and it's putting the asymptote there. So that's the graph there. And we now go on to the next one. We are now having two functions here, f of x is equals to x squared and f of x is equals to x. We want to plot these functions on the same axis. So I'll go on and press the return key there, and then the code. For the code, I'll start by entering those functions. F of x is equals to x squared. The f of x there is equals to x squared. We have it here. We called it f1. So I will need to enter the second one there, and I'll call it my f4. f4 is equals to x. So that's the function that we have there, and I'll go on and press the return key. So we now want to plot these functions here on the same graph. So what I will do there is I'll go on to say fplot, then open parenthesis, we are plotting f1. Now the f1, which we said is the x squared, we had written it above there. I click on the return key. Then to plot the second graph, I'll say hold on, and then press the return key. Then now fplot, then open parenthesis, the f4. So the f4 is this one, the graph of f of x is equals to x. Then I go on and run. So we now have these two graphs here. There is a blue one and the one with this red one here. Two graphs on the same plot. I can click on the graph there so that I can put the legend so that we know which graph is which, and I click on the legend here. So it's now giving us the legend x squared, and the x I can just go on and say update code. So it's saying update code there. It's now appearing here. Go on and change the interpreter there, and use the interpreter LaTeX so that the format there comes out a bit better. So it's LaTeX here. Then I go on and run so that I change this parts here x squared x, so that it comes out in the format as this one x squared and the other one x. So I'll go on and run, and we have our legend there has now been formatted. X squared is the blue line, then x is the red line. But if you want to change the domain there, because it's plotting from -5 to 5, If you want to focus on a certain area, let's say for this one, you just have to go on and change for the domain of these two functions here.